Hello and welcome to Poetry Northwest's Winter Spring Issue Launch Party. I am Keetje Kuipers and I've been editor of this wonderful journal since 2020, but I have been here with the staff since 2016. And it has been such a joy to work with this magazine and work with the incredible people that make it possible. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming a few of the outstanding poets from our most recent issue, Anthony Thomas Lombardi, Esther Lynn, Jessica Jacobs, Patrycja Humienik, and Troy Osaki, who will be reading To Dazzle and Delight Us. In the chat, which I'm going to simultaneously run this evening because I'm multi-talented, you will find a link to the current issue, which I encourage you to take a closer look at if you haven't already. So a few quick notes before we get started this evening. I'm joining you today from Missoula, Montana, the longtime home of the Salish and Kalispel peoples. I feel gratitude every day for my life here in this valley where I remain a guest. I'm going to drop another link into the chat here. Yes, and you'll see this is a link to Native Land Digital where you can find out whose land you're currently living on. I hope you'll actively participate in our acknowledgement by sharing with us in the chat this evening the native lands that you are joining us from tonight. I also want to share with you Poetry Northwest's recently published 2021 anti-racism report. This is our second annual anti-racism report, something that we put together at the start of every year. And it's where we publicly measure our progress and hold ourselves accountable as a literary institution for dismantling racism, both within our magazine and our community. So you'll find a link to that report in the chat as well. You'll see the goals that we set for ourselves last year, how we did on those goals, and the things we're recommitting ourselves to, and what we have discovered we still need to work on in the coming year. Tonight, I am grateful not only for all of my staff who make this totally beautiful magazine possible, but I'm also really grateful for the assistance, the incredible assistance of Malvika Jolie, who is guest curating this event with me tonight. She's the founder and host of the New Third World Reading Series, which will be holding their own spectacular event on Sunday afternoon. Please do check out that link that I'm dropping in now. Malvika is a generous literary citizen, a genius, a fire starter, and I cannot wait to enjoy her new reading series, which I think we will be hearing a lot about as it gets going. Tonight, we also have Mylan Gotland joining us to provide ASL interpretation for our readers. Thank you so much for being here, Mylan. Live captioning, if you are interested in it, is also available by pressing the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And I think that those are all of my announcements. And now we can get to the good stuff. Our first reader tonight is Anthony Thomas Lombardi. Anthony Thomas Lombardi is a Pushcart nominated poet, organizer, activist, and educator. He is the founder and director of Word is Bond, a community-centered reading series partnered with AAWW that raises funds for transnational relief efforts and mutual aid organizations, and currently serves as assistant poetry editor for Sundog Lit. A recipient of the Poetry Project's Emerge Surface B Fellowship, his work has appeared or will soon in Guernica, Black Warrior Review, Gulf Coast, Colorado Review, Denver Quarterly, Massachusetts Review, North American Review, and elsewhere. He lives in Brooklyn with his cat, Dilla. When I first saw his poem, Ode to the Seagull, it has a much longer title than that, which I think you're going to hear tonight, I knew that it had to be in our pages. In fact, my entire staff on Slack went wild for it. So please welcome Anthony.
Hi. I'm so grateful to be sharing space with so many amazing folks on either end of the spectrum, whether it's editing, writers, readers or people joining us, most importantly. Attention is our one unreplenishable resource. So the fact that y'all are giving it to us means a lot. I do want to just quickly say that I am coming from, I live on the unceded land of the Munsee, Lenape, and Canarsie tribes, and I want to acknowledge that. I'm going to jump right into some sad poems, which I hope you're all ready for. The full title that was not mentioned, I will mention it. This is a poem that's in the new issue, and I just want to quickly say about this poem that this sounds sad, but it's actually really dope. I started writing this in the Bellevue psychiatric ward, and I finished writing it in Coney Island, which is my happy place. So I think that kind of says everything that needs to be said about it, besides the words that are on the page. Ode to the seagull with what looks like a chicken bone in its beak, but could be another seagull's leg for all I know. And there is an epigraph. I want to learn how to make something holy, then walk away. Nicole Seeley. I too know what it is to cannibalize those bent on leaving the flock to scavenge what's been left behind, the broken limbs of a beloved, burnt in twisted spoons, unrecognizable from the dining set. You exhibit the patience of a monument cracking through every grain of sand as the sun peeks out from behind the clouds like a killer through the curtains. Once I killed a cockroach and scrubbed the remains with baking soda, tile and grout, carving little crosses into my knees, having read that a pregnant female will release an army of eggs to replace the dead. A spider will spin endless hours of silk only to gorge on a fly that missed its web and bless the broken flesh anyway. Sometimes I wish I believed in God, just so I can summon this hunger by a name as regal as feast or miracle. Instead, I call it luck. Take out an insurance policy that won't even cover the roses on my casket. Any port in a storm, my grandmother used to say. I've choked back bile at her table on Easter Sunday as the risen glowed around me like a sky crazed with stars. Last night, the only visible body in the sky was Mars, the infrared dot of a trained assassin or an eye soft as prayer. All that's left to kill is time. The sand surrenders to the ocean, and farther out, the ocean surrenders to the horizon. I'm resigned to these laws of gravity, but why won't you fly away? The next poem is called "And with Every Sunrise, Another Reason to Mourn." At AA meetings, I used to upstage the old timers who cradled sins the way soil shelters the dead. My mouth, a moonless cave, and an orchid tucked behind my ear. When I qualified with my own story, I couldn't remember half of it. Told instead the legend of the hummingbird who never alighted on land or branch, spent its years in flight above cities like gurgling throats, wings lithe and torrential at the piano's final chord. Now I remember too well the trail of spent nails, stacked palms, leaking rust. Ancient Christians called an anxious heart the eighth deadly sin. A shark beats for an hour after it stops swimming, then gets picked apart by schools of fish. Or so said the nurse when I sat in a hospital, piss pink with blood and a twitch in my chest. I've been scrubbing my hands skinless ever since. Even at rest, I slink like a sentinel, peeking through curtains where black-crowned herons drift, as if poured from a bucket so thin and saintly it feels voyeuristic to look. I've been stealing glances at disappearing things since my lips could hold their spit. My beloved's back, its narrow march, a star's shadow. Now I only swipe the severed grapes from fruit stands, allow bees to sail undisturbed around my head, lose myself in strobes of warmth that bleed through clouds on endless planks. I know they call this grace. It's the mercy I can't take. All right, this is gonna be my last poem. Funniest story about this. I was commissioned to write this for a project, and I totally forgot about it. And then the person who commissioned me got in touch with me like the week before and was like, yo, is that poem done? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I hadn't written a word. And then I bugged out for like a week, and I wrote it on like the last day possible. And now it's the last poem in my manuscript, which is like, you know, I think the most important poem. So I guess I was commissioned for a reason. The ocean isn't haunted. It just holds our dead. Pavement ungoverned, parched blades of grass untamed give Gravesend the name careworn. I am selfish. I want all of its curses. Walking with crossed legs, my body deflated since you knew me. I'm often weighed down by all this useless beauty, toiling toward the ocean like a dead comet. I see the clouds reflected in my phone, the pigeons feeding beneath me through the slats in a bench. A man at a power plant cuts a wire thick as a king's ring, and thousands of birds disappear. You don't try to leave. You either do or you don't. Don't you tell me about patience. I have counted from 1 to 90 between walls and their crooked picture frames, ignoring yesterday and today with neatly sewn tulips, my knuckles hard and white as teeth. I have walked water, parted so long, I've become the shore. You were right about the end. Landfall makes no difference. I used to not, but now know it well. The lonely take their lightness literally, ride wind whipped from wasps' wings, past the waves and breakers. The dead crack their collarbones and still come up swinging. It wasn't always this hard. It was often impossible. A bell rings, its tongue useless without human touch. It's funny, I don't remember there being any churches around here. If you see me friendly as frost, fists thrown at the devil on the split wood in Coney Island, I know I look like a boxer clinching to catch breath, but I'm holding us in place like the moon losing its last chance to go rogue. I'm cautious, but nothing is harmless. Every day the sun is late to kiss the shore. I try to drown the bully swan, forgetting he knows how to swim. You are here, somewhere in the wind, blowing sand on the road that won't stay behind me. I need you to know I'm still terrified. A pilgrim, a lost pilgrim who won't get off his knees. Thank all of you. I love all of you. Every last one of you. You. I love you all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Anthony. That was a beautiful reading, and I love all the incredible musculature of your poems. I mean, they are like embodied and alive, and I think we all feel them deeply. So thank you so much for sharing those with us tonight. Our next reader is Esther Lynn. Esther Lynn was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and lived in the United States as an undocumented immigrant for 21 years. Currently, she is a writing resident at Cité Internationale in Paris, where it's about 2 a.m. She was a 2020 fellow at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, a 2017 to 19 Wallace Stegner Fellow, and author of the PSA award-winning chapbook, The Ghost Wife. She co-organizes the UndocuPoets, which promotes the work of undocumented poets and raises consciousness about the structural barriers they face in the literary community. Not only is Esther's work in the most recent issue of our magazine, but she has just this last week decided to join our staff as an editorial assistant. So take note, being published in the magazine is the gateway drug to becoming a part of the family here at Poetry Northwest. We are so glad to have her.
Thank you so much, Keetje. I'd like to thank all the staff at Poetry Northwest for their patience and our fellow poets reading tonight. It's an honor to be with you. I'll be reading some drafts that I'm test running with you all. I've been trying to write some poems that I feel are more direct about how no one's ever a single identity. We're never just one thing. For myself, I was undocumented, but also a member of a cult that my mother fell in with. My family was Chinese, but also Brazilian. I wanted to love and be loved for who I am, but for most of my life, I had to think about marrying for a green card too, which is what some of the poems are about. And sometimes it becomes all too complicated for me as well. Okay. Of babes. In 1992, my mother believed the world was going to end. Having given this church cash and also her wedding ring, a sign of true fidelity, she asked me in the parking lot, is it better to be citizens of heaven or of the United States? 10 years old, I knew well enough what to say. Then she called the caseworker, and this is how my siblings and I remained illegal. Season of cherries. First the pink ones with yellow lights, then the silky dark ones. Sweeter, nearly cloying as you and I eat and eat until the bag folds over. My first knowledge was, tell no one. This is love among the undocumented. Tell no one. When I met you, even you, I wondered, would you do it? In the courtyard, the dust rises. Soon, there will be peaches, plums. I am ready for them all. My mother says, well, what did you expect? Deportation is deportation. Heartbreak is heartbreak. They shouldn't be the same to us. No rain, it turns out. You and I sleep a while, make love before the moon sets. The shadows of each eyelash dive like swifts down your cheek. Attention to detail is a survivor's trait. Will you marry me is one question. Will you report me is the other. First snow. My mother bought us matching maroon coats for the event. New to such clothes, I zipped right into the wool of my scarf, last child out. The hedge held me like a box. It would burst brilliant pink one day, my first flowers in the Northern Hemisphere. Today, It stood puffy with something limp and indolent, the way it lay across the stems. With a bare finger, I poked and poked, while beyond, my sister and brother shrieked, trying to build a snowman they knew was expected of them. It was mostly mud, even though snow fell everywhere. The pavement, the cars, my mother's hair. The beautiful country. That's what the Chinese call America. We must have appeared odd. 3 children in identical coats, looking around in disbelief. This is my last poem, Womankind. In the history of womankind, no one has been more scammed than my mother. The man who told her she was his only wife. The man who could hand out green cards after we arrived. The man who guaranteed her rapture to heaven. The man who tendered his love for the green card she didn't have. My mother believed she was bold. I too am susceptible. I too wish to believe I am bold and wise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. I feel like you sometimes have that experience where you hear someone read new poems that aren't in a book yet, and even if it's just a small selection of them, you feel like you know that book, you understand the book that's going to be coming. And I feel like I feel that book. I can't wait for that book. It's yeah. Thank you so much for sharing those poems with us. All right, our next reader this evening is Jessica Jacobs. Jessica Jacobs is the author of Take Me With You Wherever You're Going, one of Library Journal's best poetry books of the year and winner of the Devil's Kitchen Award, Pelvis with Distance, winner of the New Mexico Book Award, and Write It, 100 Poetry Prompts to Inspire, which she co-authored with her wife, Nicole Brown. Chapbook editor for Beloit Poetry Journal, Four-Way Books will publish Jessica's collection In Conversation with the Book of Genesis in 2024. Jessica is one half of one of my favorite lesbian poet power couples. There are like a few now. And I mean that literally. There is so much power in her poems. So please welcome Jessica.
Thank you so much, Keetje. Yeah, thank you. And just this, the entire issue is incredible. And I'm so honored to be here reading on behalf of it. And I'm just going to read you 2 poems. The first appeared in Poetry Northwest. And I am reading tonight from Asheville, the unceded land of the Eastern Cherokee. And yeah, as Keetje said, I will be reading tonight from a collection that is in conversation with the Book of Genesis, going section by section. And as someone who lived a pretty secular life my entire life and never read the Torah, I was really shocked by how relevant that text was and how it just was constantly speaking to whatever was happening in my life, even going for a run on a super queer beach in Provincetown, where I noticed that the ladies were in one section and the fellas were in the other, which kind of reminded me of an Orthodox synagogue. And they're usually separated by something called the mechitza, which is like a little dividing cloth. God forbid you see the other person. And the other thing that I thought of after this very gay run was the fact that instead of a handshake or whatever we're doing now, fist bumping or elbow bumping, the way that you would make a promise to someone if you were a dude was to clasp his genitals and swear an oath. So there you go. And I'm going to begin with a little verse from Genesis 24:2. And Abraham said to his servant, pray, put your hand, pray, under my thigh, that I might make you swear by the Lord. Saturday services at the Provincetown shore. Just off the parking lot, the lesbians come prepared. Our section, a series of small encampments fortified with tents, coolers, canvas chairs, and the occasional baby under a pop-up sunshade. A sunscreen slathered dealer shuffles cards on a sturdy folding table. But down a long mechitza of pebbled sand, the masters of minimalism. The men with little more than flip-flops and hand towels. Oceanfront anthropologist, trespasser between tribes, I jog past, note how the sculpted V's of their backs arrow to an outcropping of asses, polished as tumbled stones. At the shoreline, a man flips into a handstand, penis flapping like a windsock in low breeze. Inverted Michelangelo until his scan for admirers unkilters him into the surf. A seagull skims out, wings slow clapping the water. Behind me, the land of women gripping beer koozies, fanning themselves with hands of Texas Hold'em. I'll return, I'm required. All my stuff is still there. And yes, men can make a bit much of their manhood. Family jewels, third leg, second brain. But the trappings of comfort can obscure an unadorned need. And for just this barefoot mile, I let myself envy their economy, the premium they place on desire. 2 by 2, men enter the dunes. Because anyone taking an oath, said Rashi, must hold in their hand a sacred object, and because circumcision was Abraham's first commandment and came to him through suffering and was beloved to him, he chose it as the object on which his servant swore. For these moments they share, no matter what Leviticus says, pursing tight its prurient verses. These men too are taking a kind of oath. Our bodies are all we entail. This one could be just as gay, depending on how you read it. So one other story that just I kept coming back to was the story of Jacob wrestling beside the river. And so just if you're not familiar, Jacob had betrayed his brother. He was fleeing from him. He was terrified. And he was so scared that he took all of his wealth, his whole family, and put them on one side of the river. And then he went to the other side. And as soon as night fell, a stranger appeared. And he wrestled with this stranger until dawn. And it wasn't until dawn that he said, I will not release you unless you bless me. And that was when Jacob was given the name Israel, which can be translated as he who wrestles with God or God wrestler. And in some interpretations, this stranger was the angel of God with whom he was wrestling. But in others, this was a very dark night of the soul. He was wrestling with himself. And it felt especially important to read this now in a time when, as a country, as a people, as individuals, there's so much that we're wrestling with. God wrestling. The river has tasted the salt of your skin, has lapped at your calves with its current. The river has swallowed the press of your steps. There is no record of your crossing. The river is between you and everything you call your life. So you step into a stranger's arms. Your shoulder fits theirs like a bone in its socket. Your jaw notches theirs. All around you, a profusion of oleanders beams back the moonlight, offering a carpet of petals. In your arms, all the promises you've yet to keep, all you've done that shames you. But what is wrestling if not an embrace? It's too dark to know you have the same face, and only like this, cheek to cheek, each looking over the other's shoulder, can you see the world whole. Close at first as a slow dance, you spin and spin, your tracks a tight coin. Matched, you step out, making a spear tip of your bodies. Matched, you step further, levered like rafters, needing the other to stay aloft. Your tracks trace widening circles, ringing out through the fallen blossoms. Names are required only when not alone. This stranger does not give you a new name, just dippers up the one you tender in your chest. The day is breaking, the nights hold. The far bank is calling. On one side, you. On the other, your life. Join them. Thank you.
See, power. Totally sexy, amazing, cool power. I love those poems. Thank you so much, Jessica. All right. Our next reader is Patrycja Humienik. Patrycja, the daughter of Polish immigrants, is a writer based in Seattle, Washington. She serves as events director with the Seventh Wave and an assistant poetry editor with Newfound, and works in the Office of Equity and Justice at the University of Washington. Patrycja has developed writing and movement workshops for the Henry Art Gallery, Right Dobe, Puksta Civic Engagement Foundation, in prisons and elsewhere. Her poetry is featured or forthcoming in Ninth Letter, Tri-Quarterly, Waxwing, Southeast Review, Passages North, among others. And she is working on her first book of poems, Anchor Baby. We were extremely lucky to feature her gorgeous poem, We, on the very first page of our winter spring issue. So you know I really loved it, and I'm hoping that she will read it for us tonight. Welcome, Patrycja.
Thank you so much for having me, and huge thank you to all my gorgeous co-readers tonight, to the whole Poetry Northwest team. So grateful for this journal and this space tonight. Thanks for everyone tuning in. I've been feeling really heavy-hearted today, with just feeling for my family in Poland and all of Eastern Europe, beloveds there, just for the world and all the places that war touches. And I feel really grateful for spaces like this. I feel like in the life of words, we keep coming up against language's failures, and I don't have like an answer for that, but I also feel really held by, and I was going back to Keetje's intro for this issue where she said something beautiful about this very thing, where she says, we can't live inside poems, we can't fight or love there, but we can acknowledge our interconnectedness, our smallness inside them, in order to walk out into the world larger and more capable of transformation together. And I feel that tonight and in this space, and just with the brilliance and laughter of all of your work. So thank you so much for having me. And I will kick it off with that poem, We, that I'm so lucky to start this beautiful issue with. So thank you for having me. We. Who am I to speak for anyone but my many selves? Here, this page, fingers running over you. Yes, you, dear reader. Have we? Do I know you? We, as in all bodies ever touched, in passing, past. I was born, an ocean away from where I was conceived, circling a prayer, longing, bending over, under, how water goes, grief, pooling in my clavicles, and all who came before, is we a home? Who is not here, left out? In Spanish, nosotros, otro, as an other. When I learn a language not spoken in my family, am I trying to expand the we? We is me in Polish, the Y softer, not possession, it's not mine, to belong to, be longed for, is we a longing? I found a lover and we left the city temporarily. Crackle of the fire said as much. Temple into the sprawl of limbs which came later. First, the alchemists. Oysters we ate quietly as we could, laughing, not saying a word, eyes full of language. And it wasn't that no one had ever touched me before, but it had never been like this, tunnelless, not a search for a prize, zippered pearl to coax out of grieving, not the scarcity of hardship or the dismissal of it, but we did look up, air glow, sky a cicatrix, purpling, paler, damage, and the need to undo it, not to fix, but to unribbon the past. My mama grew up in a rural place, rolling hills of jade. My name betrayed her wish to leave that lack. Szlachetnie urodzona. Desire for wealth and its associated ease. I don't blame her for using a name like a tool for weeding. I too prune and tug at my story, but she wanted me to live up to my name, and for that I might blame her. I learn other names, plants that please me. Forsythia, hyacinth, pyracantha, my lover, gives me a dried bouquet. I prefer weeping, willow, even seaweed, something of water. I want not to say this, but to be understood with my eyes, the way I was for a moment by the fire. But some lovers are not for lasting, though that part comes later. If I, must I tell the truth? This next poem is a newer one. And oh, you all are so sweet in the chat. I can't even look at that right now. Don't make me cry. I am going to read a poem that's a part of a series I'm working on in my first book. And this one's still in progress. It's a letter. I have a series of letters to another immigrant daughter. And this one is for Itiola Jones, who's here in our Zoom room today. Letter to another immigrant daughter for Itiola. Like my father, I love trains and beautiful women. When have you let yourself off the rails? I first wrote off kilter, but kilter sounds like a word that would position me at an edge. I'd look out and call the view stunning, slip a hand in my pocket to touch other borders. Feeling for the place and the fabric worn thin from repeated touch, that cliff of too much trench of a thought repeating, ached over, aching still. There are train rides I wish I'd taken. Clamor on all sides en route to the dining car, watching rivers and the trees at their banks. Rib cages hinged in splintered urge toward jade. They clench their roots and each other close so as not to fall in. Let landscapes skip rocks across our faces pressed up against the glass. Tell me a story. Tell me everything. Your laugh widens the gaze. If the trees watch us, in one flicker they see where breath is held. Untuned jaw. I'm not sure a daughter can ever be grateful enough. Some days I am thankless, fogging up the window, drawing hearts. I think I'll end there. Thank you so much for having me.
Sometimes that heaviness of the heavy heart is actually what we need. We need to be weighted and to feel ourselves pressed into this place and this moment. And I'm grateful for you for providing that for us tonight, Patrycja. Thank you. Our final reader this evening is Troy Osaki. Troy Osaki is a Filipino-Japanese poet, organizer, and attorney from Seattle, Washington, a three-time Grand Slam poetry champion and recipient of grant awards from Artist Trust and the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. He has earned fellowships from Kundiman, Hugo House, and the Jack Straw Cultural Center. His work has appeared in The Margins, Muzzle Magazine, Pank, Tinderbox Poetry Journal, and elsewhere. He writes in hopes to build a safe and just place to live in by uniting the people and reimagining the world through poetry. I have seen some of Troy's amazing poems set to music, and I don't think we're going to get to have that treat tonight, but they are musical with or without accompaniment, and I am so excited that we get to have them on the air with us this evening.
Sweet. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Troy here, he, him pronouns, originally from Seattle, occupied Duwamish territory, but calling in from Victorville, California right now, so the high desert. Yeah, thank you so much to all the readers tonight. I'm so grateful to be here alongside you, and I'm just still thinking about all these incredible poems and lines. I'm thinking about I wrote some down and just the ones, yeah, I have the only visible body in the sky was Mars. Deportation is deportation. Heartbreak is heartbreak. A seagull skims out, wings slow clapping the water. I was born an ocean away from where I was conceived, circling a prayer. Yeah, if you haven't checked out this issue yet, please go check it out. It's super amazing. So again, my name's Troy. I'll be sharing two poems today, both of which have been graciously published by Poetry Northwest. And just for a little bit of context, these poems were, I wrote these pieces after visiting Europe and particularly visiting Filipino organizers who were essentially exiled from the Philippines for their organizing work. And what I find really moving is that they continue to organize even while overseas. And thinking about my family history, my grandpa, he moved, he came from the Philippines to the States in 1945 towards the end of Japanese occupation at the age of 18. And just thinking about how I don't imagine any 18-year-old would want to leave their family, right, and their homeland behind unless it was, unless they felt like that was the only option. And so, today Filipinos are continuing to leave the homeland because of a lack of opportunity, because of things like war and colonization and imperialism. And I really appreciate Patrycja for bringing into the space today what's been happening around the world. And I just like to offer these poems as a little bit of strength and just a little bit of warmth for those who are experiencing these things today. And just for all the oppressed people around the world, my hope is that we don't go on as business as usual, knowing that these things are happening in the world. So just would like to offer these pieces in that spirit. So with that said, thank you all so much for having me. I hope you enjoy these poems. This first one is called "The Year Ka August Left the Philippines for the Last Time Was a whole year before my first middle school dance. Ciara's goodies, guest starring in an airless gymnasium. The Wonder Bread factory was still the Wonder Bread factory. I know he's Filipino before he says, "Kamusta?" Asks in which province my blood began. I tell him Bataan. The peninsula, our people called out each other's Spanish names when the emperor's ships landed, didn't leave. In the Netherlands, he's not alone. I meet a quiet comrade, hair curly. Once she gave care work like good water to kids whose parents disappeared, left months ago before she could vanish too. Her youngest brother stayed until he did. Now we eat hand-pulled pork tacos around a dinner table. Everyone, not me, hasn't sung karaoke in a barangay since fleeing. I bite into Belgium chocolates brought by a comrade whose laugh scream is the kind I've heard only from my mother. In Luzon, summers earlier, a stoplight, mid-Tuesday, then a smoking cry, hot metal. She plunges, hides below her jeepney seats. A motorcyclist throttles his engine, speeds off. She scans her arms for holes and finds none. Imagine someday we all come back. We lay a beach towel on sand where Magellan was beheaded, drink coconut water, and stare at the Pacific until it drowns our ankles. Another poem in which my grandpa is gone. Ka Fidel's kids ask for his ashes to be sent to the Philippines. Not his chanelas, his half-filled carton of cigarettes, or strands of hair found by the coffee pots. The birthday balloons strung to his bed, comrades humming Maligayang Bati to wrinkled sheets. When what's left of him lands in Luzon, I want a national day of mourning for every person still overseas. I want every one of them returned to. The au pair standing in Paris rain, baguette in hand. The line cook headed south for Barbados on a cruise ship. His whole barcada, dishwashers from Manila, busboys old as Ka Fidel when detained by Marcos himself. The sommelier whose bald head is shaped like my uncle's. When they dock, I want a ribeye steak and the oakiest red wine served to them. I want cold water poured on their sunburnt faces. The president's palace to sink to the bottom of our brilliant ocean. When every Filipino returns, I'll clip the graveyard grass growing above my grandpa, seal it in a bag, and bury it in the province he learned to trap fish in with his mother. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here with you tonight.
Troy, I cannot imagine a more moving or galvanizing closing to our reading tonight. We need to feel, but we also need to remember to act. Thank you for showing us that. Thank you also so much to Anthony, Esther, Jessica, Patrycja. Thank you all in the audience and in the chat for being here. As Patrycja said today, it's been a heavy-hearted day. And just before this reading, I was teaching my grad translation class here, and we were asking ourselves, do we translate to travel somewhere further from ourselves or to bring someplace far away closer to us? And the answer, of course, is both. And this is true for all poems, not just those in translation. So thank you for coming close with us this evening, for not allowing us to be so far apart tonight. You can find more of the poetry that connects us in the winter spring issue, which I'm going to link to again here. Thank you all so much. Hold yourselves close, hold these poems close. Be well. Good night.